Hey leaders, as promised, here is a video for you guys that is going to give you context on the I am statement. I want to do this every week just so you can walk into group helping students understand the context of what they're reading. Now, after last week, I asked the question, how well do you know the Bible on a scale of 1 to 10? And after seeing some of the answers, I realized it's funny, even when I talk about Jesus relating to the people in the wilderness and manna and all this stuff, like that brings up a lot of questions for people who don't know the Bible well. They might be like, wait, why were the people in the wilderness? Why did they need to escape Egypt? Why were they enslaved in Egypt? Like, how did they get there in the first place? So there's all these questions people who might not be familiar with Scripture, they just, to them, this is all like, every time I bring up a story about the Old Testament, it just is followed up by more questions. So hopefully you guys can help illuminate some of those questions for them, like why the people were why they were in slavery, why they were in Egypt, why they need to be freed from that, why they were in the desert so long, how God provided for them, to give them some context to catch them up to speed. That way they can see the significance of the statements that Jesus is going to make. So what I'm going to do is, Jesus, this week, the statement we're doing is, I am the light of the world, the statement that Jesus makes. And there's two things that you guys need to know about that. In each of these, each of these I am statements, there is a situation, there's something happening in the story that Jesus is kind of making the statement in response to. And then it's something that also connects to the Old Testament. So I touched on that last week, but the situation is, what is happening right now is the Festival of Tabernacles. Now, the Festival of Tabernacles, it was a week-long festival. It started on a Sabbath day and ended on a Sabbath day, so it was technically 8 days. And what it was this, think of like a week-long party or celebration, this big feast, the Feast of Tabernacles or Feast of Booths, as some people would say. And there's a Jewish name, I don't know how to pronounce it. But it was a week-long party that would follow immediately after Yom Kippur, which Yom Kippur was the Day of Atonement. And it was a callback to remember the fact of God's goodness and that he provides. So that's why I would celebrate with like crops and things like this. Think of like Thanksgiving. It was like they had collected all their crops. They have all this stuff. And it's kind of like, we've got food, we've got celebration, so we're going to give thanks to God. Like it was their week-long kind of Thanksgiving to God. And they would give thanks to him. But it would also remember how God was faithful when God dwelled in the tabernacle, when that's where God's presence resided when they were in the wilderness. So here's a good picture of, could I have edited this in some kind of iMovie or something? Yes, maybe, but my photo editing skills aren't that good, and I figured I could just hold up an iPad. So here is what ancient Israel would have looked like when they were wandering the wilderness. There is all these tents, and the people would have lived in dwellings like this, which is why they call this the Festival of Booths, because the people themselves would have lived in booths or tabernacles or tents, however you want to phrase it. But then right there in the center is the tabernacle where the Holy Spirit resided, or God's presence existed, and that's where God's presence dwelled. And then it actually says in the Old Testament that you see that big pillar of fire. That's not something someone just drew for, it is a drawing, yes, but that's not something that was just like made up for fun detail. It actually says that by day, a cloud of smoke would sit over the tabernacle, and that by night, a pillar of fire would sit over the tabernacle. This is the same pillar of fire that helped keep them from the Egyptians when the Egyptians were chasing them on chariots. It created a wall of fire in between the people, and it helped lead the people across, so it was a guiding thing. And throughout their entire 40 years in the desert, this pillar of fire would be this big beacon that would help them know where to go if they were traveling by night, or this cloud of smoke. It was this giant cloud that reminded them of God's presence, but also guided them and helped them know where to go. So now, fast forward to the Festival of the Tabernacles and where Jesus is at. These people, they're celebrating the Festival of Tabernacles, and something they would do to remember God's faithfulness of that pillar of fire is they'd actually have these huge candelabras that they would light. So they would light candles all around the temple, but they would light these big candles in the middle, and they would refer to these things as the lights of the world, because they believed the festival was supposed to be for all nations to come and see God's goodness and to point to him. And so it was supposed to be for all people to see God's goodness, his faithfulness, the fact that he provides. And as a symbol, the priests would go around and they'd light these giant candles. And so the whole temple would basically just be like lit up so bright, kind of trying to draw their attention back to remember the pillar of fire. So there'd be lights all around the temple, and then these giant, huge candles that were there. And so Jesus comes in, and he goes to this festival, and it says that he went undercover, that he basically like kind of went in silence and when no one really expected him to be there. And the reason is because the previous statements he was making and all the things he was doing, he was starting to gain a bunch of enemies. He was building up people who were against him, and the opposition to him was growing stronger and stronger. And so he knew that he had to come in secret in order that the tensions didn't get out of control at this festival. And then at some point in the festival, he kind of makes himself known. He starts teaching in the temple. And it says that the religious leaders tried to arrest him, but they were unable because it wasn't his time. It doesn't really tell us, he just wasn't arrested. We don't know what happened or why he was unable to be arrested, but that's what happened. And then what happens a couple days later, he's still teaching in the festival, and my guess is that, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that when he says this statement, he's probably standing in front of these giant candelabras, these giant candles basically going that are referred to as the lights of the world. And he's speaking to the audience, and he just says, loudly declaring, it actually says, he declares, "I am the light of the world." So what's crazy about this statement is he is saying, the thing that everyone has looked to? The thing that guided you in the wilderness? That you always remembered God? You know what this whole festival's about? You remember God's provision and faithfulness? He goes, that's me. I did all that. I am the reason you have this festival. I am the reason you were provided for when you were in the desert. I am the thing that has always guided you and will continue to guide you. And in this statement, there would have been no doubt about it that he was calling himself equal with God, saying, I am God. I am the one that Spirit has dwelled over you. I am the one that you are celebrating. I am the one that guides. I am the one that this thing has been all about. I am equal with God. And so it's no wonder his enemies were so mad about him. And then he makes another statement in this passage, which I'll kind of touch on with the students. But they would have gotten this fresh water for the people from this pool that would have always been creating fresh water, and it would remind them of in the desert when they were wandering around, water that would come from the rock, that God provided water for them. And Jesus said, I provide springs of living water, that whoever drinks from this water will never thirst again. And then again saying hey, you know how God provided water in the desert? Well, I'm providing a water eternally that you'll never have to thirst again. So he just over and over again asserts his claims to be God, to be equal with God, and to have authority over these things, to be what all of their festivals, all of their history, all of their literature was about. And this was a big deal. The fact that the people wanted to kill him was because they believed that the claims he was making were so outlandish that he couldn't just carry on his life as normal, making these claims. And they were we're either going to kill him because he is a blasphemer, or there were some people that were we are finally going to surrender because the Messiah is here. And that's the decision we have to make. When we look at Jesus and he says, I'm the light of the world, do we trust him with everything and go, the Messiah is here in our life? We trust you. We surrender. You are the light that guides us. You are the light that casts out darkness for us. Or do we go, no way, you can't sit on the throne of my life, and I'm not going to accept your outlandish claims. So that's what this is all about. I love the context of this. Like I said, if it were up to me, I would just make this a 45-minute lecture and teach the students all about this because I think it's so fascinating, but I know that they need the application more. So there's a lot of cool analogies you can do with light, and I encourage you even to do this in your groups. How, if you turn on a phone light and then you turn off all the lights in the room, it shines brighter, and light shines brighter in the darkness, or light has ultimate authority over darkness. Darkness is only allowed to exist when there is no light. But the moment light enters in the scene, darkness is cast out, and it's the same with our lives. If there's an area of darkness, it is because we have not invited the light into that area of our life. And so addressing that in group, and even from the sermon, trying to help students understand what it means for Jesus to be their guide and their light. So that's what I got for you guys. Again, if you want to know more about this, you can do some quick research. Just type in what is the Festival of Tabernacles all about on Google, and you will find a ton of information helping prep students for why this statement is so impactful and what it means for their life. Can't wait to see you guys this Wednesday, and really excited about the topic.